For thousands of years, humanity has searched the skies for answers. But what if the greatest secrets were never written in the stars, but carved into stone, buried beneath the sand, or lost deep under the waves? Why do civilizations that never met sculpt the same elongated skulls, the same gods with aquatic helmets, the same impossible monuments, each aligned to the heavens? Why do origin myths across continents speak of deities who arrived not from the skies, but from the seas, after an event they all describe as a world-ending flood? And why, still today, do objects emerge silently from beneath the oceans, lighting up the skies in ways no known aircraft can, only to disappear again, as if mocking the limits of our understanding? We call them legends. We label them symbols. We dismiss them as coincidence. But what if we've been wrong all along? Today's episode isn't just a retelling of ancient astronaut theories. It's a re-examination of the evidence they don't want you to revisit. Now let's be clear, this video doesn't claim to have definitive proof. We're not here to sell fantasy. But what we do have are patterns. Across centuries, across cultures, across continents. We'll look at controversial monuments like the lid of King Pakal's tomb, at underwater anomalies that defy explanation, at recurring symbols of slender beings carved from Turkey to Polynesia, all of which raise one haunting possibility, that perhaps these so-called gods weren't figments of ancient imagination, but real visitors, whose presence has been deliberately downplayed. You might agree. You might completely disagree. Either way, if questions like this keep you up at night, you've found the right place. So before we begin, do consider subscribing to Alien Conspiracy Vault. If this video sparks a thought, hit that like button or share it with someone who's ready to challenge conventional history. It really helps us reach more curious minds like yours. Now, let's follow the footprints that history tried to erase, and uncover a truth so strange it may change how we see our past, and who we believe is still watching us today. When myth becomes evidence, why water? It's a deceptively simple question. But when Billy Carson posed it, against the stillness of an ancient narrative unraveling, it struck like a forgotten memory rising to the surface. Across Earth's oldest civilizations, one enigma echoes louder than coincidence. Deities tied to the ocean, gods emerging from water, sacred floods, creators who descend, teach, and return to the depths. From ancient Sumer to the Vedic texts of India, from Babylon to Greece, cultures separated by time, language, and vast oceans, all seem to retell the same story, just in different tongues. Who were these sea gods? In Sumer, we have Enki, god of wisdom, described not merely as divine, but as one bringing tools, instruments of measurement, rods of power, and symbols of technical knowledge, all while emerging from the Abzu, the deep primeval sea. The Greeks venerated Poseidon, not just as god of the sea, but controller of earthquakes, through a trident. But some scholars ask, was that trident simply a metaphor, or a stylized depiction of a device capable of triggering seismic shifts? Oannes, the amphibious being of Babylonian myth, is perhaps the most direct link to the unknown. He rises from the sea at sunrise, teaches civilization to humanity, and then retreats into the depths before nightfall. In some depictions, he carries what looks like a portable breathing apparatus or a technical harness. Features ancient astronaut theorists believe resemble modern diving gear. In India, Vishnu is said to have taken multiple avatars, many of them aquatic. From a giant cosmic fish saving humanity from a flood, to a turtle supporting the earth, his forms seem bioengineered for water environments, or perhaps symbolic records of a species from an aquatic world. From symbolism to memory. Are these coincidences, or preserved fragments of a collective memory, encoded in myth, but rooted in reality? At Eridu, the oldest city in Sumer, believed to be Enki's domain, archaeologists found sediment layers showing abrupt water surges, precisely matching Sumerian flood accounts where divine beings intervened to save knowledge. In Babylon, reliefs show Oannes with strange tubular objects and gear-like appendages, technologies inexplicable for that era. Some argue these are stylized, sacred garments. Others ask, if you'd never seen a spacesuit, how would you carve one into stone? A forgotten contact. The deeper we look, the more myths begin to resemble mission reports. Structured arrivals, knowledge transfer, specific withdrawal. And across all stories, an affinity for water, as origin, medium, and return point. Could these beings have been aquatic extraterrestrials, from a world where water is abundant? Could the global flood myths be a cultural echo of their arrival, or their escape? We've always assumed the gods were metaphors. But if myth is not imagination, then perhaps we're staring at the remnants of a truth, too overwhelming to face directly. The answer lies not above, but below. Maybe the truth was never in temples or texts, but in the unexplored trenches of our oceans, where they first came from, and where they might still be. The slender beings, who are they? Across continents and millennia, their form remains unchanged. Tall, thin, hands folded in front, staring forward in eternal silence. They appear in the stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe, the buried torsos beneath the Moai heads, the ancient jars of Egypt, and the jungle-hidden statues of Indonesia's Bada Valley. These figures, carved long before the advent of global travel, share a nearly identical posture and anatomy, too specific, too recurring, to be dismissed as coincidence. So the question arises, who were they? Göbekli Tepe, the first ritual code. At the dawn of recorded human architecture, Göbekli Tepe, modern-day Turkey, stands as a riddle in stone. T-shaped pillars dating back over 12,000 years, thousands of years before the Great Pyramids, feature abstract beings with arms carved downward, hands neatly placed in front of the stomach, and no facial features. This ceremonial stillness echoes a hieratic posture, not of humans, but of beings who were revered. Many scholars argue it's symbolic art. But what if it's not just a symbol, but a stylized memory of a species that once stood among us? Egypt, silent witnesses on clay and stone. In ancient Egypt, ceramic jars and temple reliefs show long-limbed figures with oversized craniums, almond-shaped eyes, and the same frontal hand position. These entities were not shown in casual scenes, but in ritual contexts, surrounded by sacred geometry, altars, and offerings. Were these gods, or stylized depictions of a race remembered, not imagined? If an ancient culture encountered a being from another world, how would they preserve that memory for their descendants? They wouldn't write an engineering manual. They would chisel it in stone, depict it as sacred, and build monuments to it. Moai, more than just heads. The Moai of Easter Island have long been thought of as massive heads watching the sea. But in 2012, excavations revealed something startling. The heads were only the beginning. Full bodies, long, lean, with the same iconic hand placement, had been buried for centuries. Why? Were these not just statues, but beacons? Memorials to those who once came from across the ocean, perhaps from Atlantis, as some theorize? Bada Valley, the forgotten stone army. In Indonesia's Bada Valley, far from modern roads, hundreds of humanoid stone statues stand hidden in thick jungle. Towering, expressionless, and again, hands folded in front. They do not match local tradition. No one remembers who built them. No text mentions their origin. They simply exist, as if waiting to be found. Global signature, or coordinated message. From the Americas to the Fertile Crescent, from Polynesia to Southeast Asia, this one form repeats. Not a cultural quirk, not random artistic choice, but a systematic signature, as though a common template was shared, or a global directive followed. Who shared it? Martell's hypothesis, survivors or subterraneans. Jason Martell offers two possible explanations, both equally provocative. A post-cataclysmic race. Survivors of a lost continent, perhaps Atlantis, who dispersed their knowledge and identity through monument and myth. They stood tall, literally and metaphorically, in the memory of early humans. The Ant People of Hopi legend. A non-human race from underground, who once helped humanity survive a world-ending disaster by sheltering them beneath the earth. Symbols, or signposts. If multiple unconnected civilizations remember the same beings, and depict them in the same form, are they drawing from imagination, or from a memory the modern world refuses to believe? Perhaps these statues aren't memorials. They are markers, waypoints, left behind by a race who walked among us once, and may one day return. Advanced technology hidden in ancient imagery. If an ancient civilization never knew what a rocket was, then why did they carve something that looks exactly like one? The stone-bound pilot, King Pakal's cosmic journey. Deep in the jungles of Palenque, Mexico, lies the Temple of the Inscriptions, an architectural marvel of the ancient Maya. But what lies beneath it is far more astonishing. There, archaeologists unearthed the tomb of Kinich Janab Pakal, a king who ruled in the 7th century. Yet it was not the tomb itself that sent shockwaves through the academic world. It was its 5-ton sarcophagus lid. Etched into stone is the image of Pakal, not reclining in death, but seated upright, gripping what appears to be a control panel. His feet press against pedal-like structures, while beneath him, flames jet downward, like the exhaust of a modern rocket. Ancient astronaut theorists were quick to point out the parallels. Giorgio Tsoukalos famously remarked, "This is not religious art. This is technical documentation. A three-dimensional, stone-carved blueprint of a man flying a spaceship, reconstructing the impossible." Modern 3D imaging of Pakal's carving reveals startling mechanical features. Tubes running beneath his hands, possibly fuel lines? Panels and levers, matching cockpit layouts. An airflow channel and engine chamber, shaped much like a command module in a space capsule. And if this were a one-off anomaly, perhaps we could dismiss it. But it's not. Egypt, missiles in the desert. In the necropolis of Saqqara, Egypt, in a rarely visited tomb, a bizarre carving was found, one that looks uncannily like a vertical launch vehicle. A rocket shape with tail fins, a chamber for passengers below, and glyphs that some claim map internal structure, not mythology. Egyptologists shrug. Alternative historians wonder, why would a civilization that never saw a rocket carve one into granite? The helicopter of Abydos, a time machine in stone. In the temple of Seti I in Abydos, high on a ceiling beam, sit symbols that, at first glance, look astonishingly familiar. A helicopter, complete with rotor blades. A submarine or fighter jet, with aerodynamic curves. And futuristic flying shapes, defying typical hieroglyphic patterns. Mainstream academia explains it away as palimpsest, carvings layered over older ones. But the lines are too clean, too sharp, too detailed, as if the artist had seen these crafts with their own eyes. From Tikal to the Indus, more machines in myth. In Tikal, Guatemala, reliefs show being seated inside domes, surrounded by what look like ventilation ducts or plasma exhaust. In Harappa, modern-day Pakistan, scholars have long puzzled over a seal showing a humanoid figure seated cross-legged in a mechanical frame, surrounded by rotational symbols and energy motifs. Could these be representations of meditation? Or were ancient artists attempting to document encounters with technology they couldn't understand? Memory or metaphor? Jason Martell poses the unsettling thought. If a single artist imagines something, that's creativity. But when dozens of civilizations across time and geography depict the same machine-like forms, that's no longer imagination. That's memory, encoded in stone, preserved for survival. If these civilizations did witness advanced craft, whether piloted by gods, visitors, or survivors from an older world, then stone was their hard drive. They didn't have fiber optics, but they had granite, and they etched what they saw so that we, in some distant future, might look again and recognize the machines hidden behind the myth. Perhaps they were not just visited. Perhaps they tried to remember. And perhaps what they left us was not religion, but a warning. Objects that do not belong to our skies. We've always looked up, believing we were the observers. But what if we're the ones being observed? The night sky, a two-way mirror. Billions of eyes have gazed upward, expecting answers from the cosmos. But some, like Billy Carson, have seen something else entirely. Using military-grade night vision optics, Carson describes a moment that would reshape his understanding of reality. They weren't planes. They made no sound. They didn't blink. They didn't follow any known flight pattern. They glided, as if traveling along invisible lanes in the sky. Then, just as suddenly, they were gone, defying the laws of physics. What Carson witnessed has been reported by pilots, skywatchers, and military personnel alike. Objects stopping mid-air, hovering silently before darting away at right angles, something impossible for any human aircraft due to inertia. Craft splitting into multiple forms, each operating independently, only to recombine into a single shape. Triangular formations appearing in synchronized motion, yet completely silent and radar invisible. These are not drones, not weather balloons, and not satellites. There's something else. UAPs, USOs, or surveillance platforms. Government agencies now use sanitized terms. UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. USO, unidentified submersible objects, seen emerging from or diving into the ocean. ATIP, ODNI reports, and now NASA inquiries, all publicly acknowledge their presence. But what do they avoid calling them? Crafts, machines, operators. No one says the word beings. Multiple sightings, global, coordinated, and ongoing. In Brazil, Air Force pilots reported impossible maneuvers over the Amazon. Crafts that made instantaneous 90-degree turns at supersonic speed, with zero sonic boom. In Russia, radar operators tracked objects that appeared to move through clouds, then vanished from all systems as if cloaked. In Nevada, residents near Area 6 and other testing zones have consistently reported pulsing lights appearing nightly, but none register on satellite imaging. If they can move in silence, defy gravity, appear and disappear at will, then maybe they're not traveling at all. Maybe they're stationed. Here. Carson's warning, they're watching back. Carson admits something many researchers hesitate to say aloud. I've recorded dozens of these objects, but I don't publish all of them. Because some felt like they were watching me back. He isn't alone. Countless witnesses describe a chilling sensation. That the object isn't just passing overhead. It knows you're watching. And it chooses to stay or vanish based on that awareness. Not random. Not accidental. Lights in the sky used to be legends. Then they became sightings. Now, they're documented. But they're still unexplained. And the silence from official sources? It might not be because they don't know. It might be because they know more than they're willing to say. If we cannot explain these craft, cannot detect them consistently, and cannot predict their behavior, then the uncomfortable truth may be this. We are not the dominant intelligence in our own sky. A hidden infrastructure in the skies. If these crafts are not entering our skies, but already here, then we must consider the unthinkable. What if Earth's airspace is not ours at all? Thousands of UAP sightings occur not sporadically, but in patterns. They hover near nuclear sites, follow naval fleets, shadow astronauts aboard the ISS, and swarm conflict zones. But they never intervene. Never communicate. They simply watch. Could this be evidence of a monitoring system far older and far more advanced than any human surveillance program? Are these crafts patrolling our world or guarding it? They're always one step ahead. Radar locks fail. Infrared tracking gets scrambled. Air-to-air engagement protocols, designed for conventional threats, become useless against objects that vanish on approach. Some witnesses describe watching these crafts react before being detected, as if they anticipate electronic scans. This has led some intelligence analysts to suggest an uncomfortable possibility. They're not reacting to our presence. They're aware of our intent. It implies real-time cognition, awareness, intelligence, from the stars or from Earth's shadow. It's tempting to believe these crafts come from distant stars. But what if their origin is far more terrestrial? Some appear to emerge from bodies of water, USOs. Others descend from high-altitude atmospheric layers inaccessible to standard aircraft. A few even seem to fade into thin air, as if slipping into another frequency, not another place. Could they be interdimensional vehicles, not extraterrestrial? Or ancient machines from an earlier civilization still operating autonomously? If we measure life only by what we understand, we'll miss what's hiding in what we don't. Echoes in the ancient world. What's perhaps more unsettling is how ancient cultures may have already known. The Watchers in the Book of Enoch. The sky boats of the Vedas, which could vanish without a sound. The star beings of the Zuni and Hopi, who warned, "They do not speak, but they listen." Were these warnings? Were the gods, described in ancient texts, not divine, but simply technologically superior beings, who never left? The illusion of control. We build jets. We launch satellites. We claim air superiority. But if these objects can enter and exit our skies at will, if they choose when to be seen and when to disappear, then the unsettling truth becomes: we are not the rulers of our own sky. We are not even its oldest tenants. Appearances after disasters. Every time humanity faces catastrophe, every time nature erupts in fury or history veers into chaos, we record a suspicious pattern, the appearance of lights, beings, or objects that do not belong to this world. 1492, when history rewrote itself. In the famous sea log of Christopher Columbus, there lies a passage often overlooked. A brief, haunting note. The night before we sighted land, we saw a light rise from the ocean, ascend into the sky, and vanish. It illuminated the entire horizon. No electricity, no fireworks, no explainable source. Except for one thing: Columbus was standing at the threshold of a moment that would forever change humanity. California, as the fires raged, the sky flashed. In recent years, smartphone videos from wildfire zones in California have revealed mysterious lights drifting silently through the smoke. No sound, no clear trajectory. Some of these lights pause mid-air, vibrate, then shoot off at impossible speeds. When zoomed in, they appear to be neither drones nor rescue helicopters. The question arises: why do they appear in the midst of catastrophe? A recurring pattern over thousands of years. After the Great Flood in Sumerian and biblical accounts, the gods descend, bringing order back to chaos. After a deadly Roman-era plague, people described flying lights over the city at night, seen as signs from the gods. Following natural disasters in Asia, from the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami to the 2015 Nepal earthquake, locals reported strange lights in the sky. Observation, warning, or intervention? Jason Martell poses the uncomfortable question: if these entities appear precisely when humanity is at its weakest, is it coincidence? Or is it an opportunity for them to intervene or to monitor something? Perhaps they are the watchers, as described in the ancient texts of Enoch. Perhaps they are protectors, or perhaps they are simply waiting. The smallness of humanity before greater intelligence. In that fleeting moment, when strange objects streak across the sky during chaos, human beings suddenly understand: we are not in control. We are only a fragment of a larger picture no one has fully seen. If they appear every time we are in pain, is it compassion, or is it some form of experimentation? If their presence coincides with our moments of collapse, then maybe they're not just watching. They're waiting for something. From myth to modernity, the silent witnesses of collapse. From floods to fires, plagues to earthquakes, humanity's darkest hours are often accompanied by silent flashes in the sky. Are these cosmic coincidences? Or are we seeing a ritual of reappearance, a protocol triggered when something breaks down? Some researchers believe these events are not random, but calibrated moments when the veil between dimensions, or species, thins. A few suggest these entities only reveal themselves when global energy patterns shift violently, like a seismic flare that attracts attention from somewhere else. The plague lights, a forgotten pattern. In 14th century Europe, during the height of the Black Death, many chroniclers recorded strange orbs of light hovering above villages, just before outbreaks began. In France, monks described spheres that pulsed red above the monastery walls. In Italy, peasants saw glowing ships crossing the night sky in silence. In England, there were accounts of bright, fiery wheels floating for hours before entire communities fell ill. Were these omens, or were they detectors, scanning something we could never measure? Tsunamis and Skyfire, 2004 revisited. Following the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, satellite footage showed unexplained light bursts over affected regions hours before the quake. Local fishermen in Indonesia and Sri Lanka reported blinding flashes rising vertically from the sea. No aircraft, no meteorological explanation. What triggered those lights? Were they related to the tectonic rupture, or were they witnessing it? The crisis protocol hypothesis. Jason Martell and others have considered a radical idea. What if there's a protocol? A pattern of response? One we've never been told about. Entities, be they biological or machine, might follow a cosmic disaster response model. They do not interfere. They observe, collect, log, vanish. But why? Some suggest data collection. Others propose energetic harvesting. The more daring ask, is pain a beacon? Are we in a long-term experiment? If these appearances always follow catastrophe and never offer aid, only presence, then what if we are part of a larger system of study? Are they tracking emotional resonance, measuring psychic trauma, watching how we rebuild or how we fail? Perhaps humanity is not just watched. Perhaps we are being profiled. A countdown hidden in the chaos. What if each event, from the flood of Sumer to the fires of California, is not isolated, but part of a timeline? What if they are waiting for a tipping point? Not to help, not to harm, but to begin something. Something long overdue. The humbling of our species. In our suffering, we pray to gods. But what if the ones watching are not gods, but scientists? Every fire, every quake, every war, followed by a visitation, not of angels, but of silent intelligence. One that doesn't answer. One that only records. And if they are here, every time we fall, then maybe they don't fear our collapse. Maybe they expect it. The truth beneath the ocean? We searched the stars for them. But perhaps they were always right beneath our feet. We know more about Mars than our own oceans. According to NOAA, over 80% of the ocean floor remains unexplored. That's not a gap in knowledge. That's a blind spot big enough to hide civilizations. We've mapped the moon in stunning detail. We've probed the Martian surface. But the abyss beneath Earth's oceans? Still untouched. If anything, the ocean isn't our last frontier. It's our first mystery, and it may have been claimed long before we arrived. UFOs, the silent breach between two worlds. We call them UFOs when they're in the sky. But beneath the water, they change names. USOs, unidentified submersible objects. Observed by naval sonar teams, accelerating at speeds over 200 knots underwater, a velocity impossible by modern standards. Tracked descending from the air into the sea without splash or resistance. Emerging from ocean trenches, lighting up the horizon, and vanishing into deep thermal layers undetectable by satellite. If they can break the surface without a sound, then maybe the ocean isn't their obstacle. It's their gateway. Geographic hotspots, are they markers of activity? Some locations have become repeat offenders in anomalous sightings. The Puerto Rico Trench, naval sonar frequently disrupted. Pilots report columns of light rising from the sea. The Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth, yet probes sent into its depths often fail without explanation. The Sea of Japan, military submarines have logged underwater contacts accelerating and disappearing in seconds, without cavitation trails. Could these be bases, command outposts, or relics of an older infrastructure that predates us entirely? A civilization beneath, ancient or alien. Some propose that these are not extraterrestrial visitors, but intraterrestrial residents. Perhaps the ocean shelters a civilization that survived global cataclysms, choosing the sea over the land. Echoes of Atlantis, said to vanish beneath the waves. Lemuria, a lost continent theorized in ancient Tamil texts, swallowed by rising oceans. Even the Bible speaks of beasts that rise from the sea. Are these myths or coded memories? Are we being watched from below? Multiple sonar anomalies have been recorded, some lasting hours, others days, where massive, solid objects move beneath naval fleets, mirroring their patterns. They make no sound, send no signal, yet they follow. Not predators, not allies, observers, just like the watchers of the sky. Could there be watchers of the deep? A technology beyond pressure and sound. If this submerged force exists, its technology must defy our understanding. Vehicles that can transition between water and air seamlessly. Structures hidden beneath tectonic plates or thermal vents. Communication methods that bypass frequency entirely, perhaps telepathic or quantum-based. When we think of alien technology, we look up. But true advancement hides where no one's looking. A portal, not a place. Some even theorize that the oceans are not just hiding something, but that the water itself may be the medium. What if the oceans aren't just dark, but dimensional? Just as light bends in water, so too might space-time. Could the deepest trenches serve as portals, from one realm to another? Jason Martell reflects. We've always believed they come from above. But what if they've been here longer than us? What if the ocean isn't just where they hide? It's where they belong. And in searching the stars for answers, we may have missed the ones buried beneath the tide. When myth and science intersect, across deserts and mountaintops, beneath ancient stone and silent oceans, they've left pieces of a puzzle. Not legends, not fantasy, but a trail, carved into forgotten temples, buried under collapsed civilizations, etched into oral traditions passed through the bloodlines of forgotten tribes. A pattern has always been there, waiting. Fish-headed gods appearing after cataclysms. Slender beings memorialized across continents. Objects in the sky and sea that defy science, but never the memory of myth. And always, a sense of observation, of presence, of a silent intelligence that never left. Jason Martell and Billy Carson never claimed to have all the answers. They never demanded belief. What they've offered, through decades of study, is far more powerful. A new lens. A way to re-examine what we've been told. To question what we've dismissed. To see connections where others saw coincidence. What if the gods of old weren't metaphors, but visitors? What if divine miracles were misunderstood technologies? What if sacred texts, carvings, and megaliths were not spiritual tales, but field reports from ancient witnesses trying to make sense of the impossible? If they came once, in times of chaos, in times of flood, in fire and in shadow, why assume they stopped? Maybe they've been here through every era. Maybe they never came, because they've always been here, watching, recording, waiting. We asked, are we alone in the universe? But maybe the real question is, do we even understand who shares this planet with us? We've looked to the heavens, seeking contact, but we forgot to look beneath the surface, beneath our feet, beneath our assumptions. If you've come this far, you already feel it. Something doesn't add up. You are not alone in that feeling. This isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new investigation. And if you want to keep digging, to follow where others turn away, to explore what they don't want you to know, then subscribe to Alien Conspiracy Vault. Sure. And keep your mind wide open, because the moment we stop asking questions is the moment the truth vanishes again. If ancient astronauts walked among us, then maybe the gods aren't coming back. Maybe they never left.